there are so many pieces that you don't know, right? And I remember asking my teacher this question. So I asked, is it better to learn a piece deeper or to learn a lot of pieces, but just kind of get to know them to have an impression? The answer was you should learn a lot of pieces and all of them deep. Hello, happy July, and welcome to officially the second half of the year of 2022. I have to be honest, this feeling or this fact of now we are actually in the second half of the year, it's really scary. But I'm going to say it's so exciting because we want positive thinking, right? During the month of July, the Conductor's podcast will take a break from our usual interview episode because I thought here in the summer we are kind of off season for professional musicians, and for students you're maybe enjoying your summer break, attending summer festivals, workshops, or just recharging and relaxing, whatever. So for this month we are having a Conductor's podcast summer mini series. For this month, every week I will be sharing some tips about some aspect related to the profession of a conductor, something that we don't really always talk about in schools or in, conducting master classes or workshops. A lot of times I felt our training and had been so focused on your conducting skills. But once you're in the business, those conducting the stick techniques are only just a very, very small part of the business, a very, very small part about how you present yourself as a conductor and a musician, and realistically, a very, very small part of whether you got the job or not. For today, the very first episode of this mini-series, I'll be talking about programming. I wanted to start with this because this is something that we don't really get to practice almost at all when we're in school, unless you're in such a luxurious program that your teacher allows you a full concert of yourself as a degree recital or as part of the degree requirement. Then that's probably the first or the only time you have to think about a program from beginning to the end. But if we don't really learn about doing it, how can we get better, right? A lot of us, including myself, only start programming when I get a job or when I have a pickup ensemble. During my master's degree, I started an ensemble of my own. I called it Cincinnati Sinfonietta. When I did my master's at CCM, we did 3 concerts a year, and most of the program's ideas I listened to my teacher. He gave really great advices, but really, I didn't really come up with those ideas myself. And it was a learning process after I actually got a job. And before I share with you my ideas, I wanted to encourage you to listen to episode number 3, if you haven't already. It's a conversation between me and my dear friend, Michelle Raffrano, who is the co-founder and the conductor for Protestra, which is an organization based in New York City, which organizes concerts and performances for social justice causes. And in episode number 3, she talked about her programming process when she had to program for a themed performance that is about climate changes. I will put the link in the show notes, but check out episode number 3 if you haven't already. So the most important thing for me in terms of programming is to find a fine balance between 2 important questions. The first question is, what can we already do well? Does we include myself as a conductor and a musician, and also my ensemble, the ensemble that I'm going to work with? And the second question is, what do we need to improve on? What do we need to work on? What do we need to get better with? What are we struggling? And that, again, is both me as a conductor. Am I lacking some better skills in rehearsal so I can change things more effectively? Or am I needing some better techniques that I can show a certain passage with my body instead of having to talk about it? How about my ensemble? Are they ready to explore to different new styles? Are they needing help with, say, rhythmic sessions? Are they better with more lyrical, romantic sounds but really struggle when they have to count? I think that's probably a lot of the young ensembles, but that's just an example. Are they getting better with the classical styles and now it needs to be explored further back to include some Baroque styles pieces? Or should we explore more to different sounds that is contemporary, or do we want to explore the idea of having multimedia performances? Do we want to include film or sound effects, lighting? Is that something that we want to explore too? And this is a lot of things to consider, right? So there are 4 parts: what I can do well already, what I need to work on, what the ensemble can already do well, and what does the ensemble need to work on? How can I continue to develop this ensemble to make my players better musicians at the end of the season compared to the beginning of the season, right? And then also have to say, not all conductors program like this. Some of them would put their needs first or their wantings first. Oh, I want to conduct Rachmaninoff. I want to conduct Tchaikovsky. I want to conduct only new music when you don't have that kind of player who can handle it or can play it well. I am all against playing repertoire just for the name, for the fame, or for the nice feeling of it. Of course, it feels great when you play something that is so famous, so big, but I felt that is really actually a disservice to the musicians and to myself if we're just plowing through things without even understanding little basics of how this music is written, why the sounds are structured this way, or even struggling technically to just play the right note. I don't believe in doing that, but I have to say a lot of my colleagues do so. And some of them are even well received because it's really exciting, right? If you're in an ensemble that plays all the famous things all the time, you feel good about it. And not all audience members or parents or your board members understand it's well executed. But I would just say it's just me. And I want to make sure that I'm really considering the 4 corners of the programming process. I try not to lean towards any one of them heavily for any program. I don't want a concert that is super extremely hard that we are struggling from beginning to the end. I don't want a concert with just easy cheesy tunes that everybody can already play and then we ended up having too much rehearsal time. That is not very possible. But that's just an example because sometimes the tune gets really old when you have too much time. I think I made that mistake my first concert when I got my first job because I didn't realize that we had so much time. I think we had 10 weeks to prepare half of the concert. So by the time, when we are by week 7, 8, they've learned the music, but then it's getting so old that it's hard to make them more polished because we've been playing the same thing over and over again. So that's just a beginning principles that I'm always thinking for every single concert and also for every single season when I'm thinking about the overarching idea between concerts to concerts in that year and also beyond the year. Sometimes I have a 3 or 5 year program. If I have a music directorship, I know that I will get the job for the near future so I can plan ahead. I want my ensemble to be able to play a certain things in 3 years. Or getting closer to that level or artistry, then I can think ahead and try to move both myself and also my musicians into that direction. So after this principle talking, I have practical considerations and artistic considerations that I want to share with you. Let's start with the practical ones, things that are easy to understand. So the first thing I look at is instrumentation. I don't have the luxury of having all the instruments or players that I want or need to play any given repertoire. I don't think that's true for anyone. Even for a choir, it's not always true that you have all 4 sessions equally strong, right? Sometimes you have the tenor session a little weak. Sometimes you have too many alto voices. Or sometimes you don't have enough people if you are thinking about splitting, like some of the choral pieces, they are so complicated that there is soprano 1, 2, 3, alto 1, 2, tenor 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I'm just kidding. So instrumentation is always the first thing that I think and I look into. And if I need to hire extra additional players, can I afford it? Can I afford hiring 2 harpists, 4 percussionists, and extra basses, trombones, tubas, and so on? So that's a really practical consideration. I need to see if this piece would work instrumentation-wise. The next thing is difficulty level and rehearsal time. This is something that is a little more complicated because you don't want to under-program. The example that I would just talk to you about, like the kind of we didn't program enough music or challenging enough music to keep the musician challenged and engaged throughout the process. And you don't want to over-program, playing things that are so big that they can barely just get through or swim through or fake through. As sometimes as string players, you're faking through a lot of the fast notes. But that comes with time, experience, and also your understanding of the repertoire. And next week, I'll be talking more about prepping for rehearsal, and I will speak a little more about that. But in general, you want to make sure that you pick pieces that will be a reasonable goal for your musicians to achieve a certain level that is presentable, right? You don't want to have a concert that is miserable, then you probably overprogrammed. And the last thing is duration. I always think about duration, not only because my rehearsal time seems to be on the shorter side. I have rehearsals from 75 minutes, sometimes 60 minutes to 2 hours. Very rarely I have 3-hour rehearsals. I'm always very careful because I want to make sure that when I have a dress rehearsal, I don't overprogram, that I can play through the program, at least in a rehearsal. I actually have a friend who never think about duration when he programs. I don't know how he works that way, but I usually try to have the total duration of music for a concert from 45 to the most 100 minutes, depending on the pieces, the repertoire, and the occasion, and all that. But I always have duration in mind. So my practical considerations are instrumentation, difficulty level, and rehearsal time, and duration. That's something that's easily understood. Now, coming to my artistic considerations. That is something more personal, 1, and 2 has a lot to do with your knowledge of the repertoire. What pieces do you know that will work or not for your ensemble, right? So the first thing I always think is, do I have anything that I'm presenting? Is it like water themed, or is this nationality Russian, French, German, Austrian, Spanish, Latino, like no matter it's Spanish, Italian, Latin wise, or Latin American wise, or if it's American music, do I have a thing? The next thing that I think about is, are there any predetermined pieces? Do I have a guest soloist who want to do something? Do I have a concerto competition winner that I have to cater, that I have to perform a certain concerto? Do I have a sponsor that would be appealed to a certain type of repertoire, or do they, that kind of thing? Like sometimes you have predetermined pieces. Most often they are concerto, but it could be something else. Like once I was working with a guest soloist who also composed, so we wanted to include a composition of hers. So that is something that cannot be changed. We have to have that piece on that concert and have to work around it. The last thing of my artistic consideration is, what is the audience overarching listening experience? This is also something that we don't really talk about, traditionally. We don't think about that, especially in the orchestral world. The very standard practice of repertoire for quite a while had been like an overture or a concert opener, 10 minutes, 12-ish maybe, no more than 15, sometimes the most, maybe 20. Then there's a concerto with a soloist, the intermission, the second half, a symphony of some kind, or a orchestral suite, like a heavy, big, giant piece to set the second half of the program. But it doesn't have to be that way. We don't always need that sandwich, right? We don't always just need appetite first course and second course. We can switch things around. But I always think about how the audience will receive it audibly. Like, when they come, the first thing that they are hearing of the performance, and then after this, they are going to experience a different type of sound. And then would it fit to have a total different style? If I put a very modern piece with extensive techniques right after a Beethoven symphony, would that work? Maybe, why not? Or right before, right? You never know, but you have to think about that. That's what I believe. So my artistic considerations are, first, any themes. Secondly, do I have any predetermined pieces? And the third one is, what is the audience overarching listening experience? Here, I wanted to stop or pause for a minute and share two stories with you. One is, when I studied my DMA at Eastman, we had a conducting symposium. We have to do that with all the different conductors from different areas. So all DMA conducting students had to take a semester from the band conductor, one semester from the new music conductor, and one semester from the orchestra, and the other one from the choral conductor. So when we had the seminar with Blood Lutman, who is the new music ensemble director at Eastman, he shared that he likes to program pieces written in the same year, or around the same year, or within the 5 years' time, to show how people experience the world differently. Like if you have a piece from a French composer, from a Brazilian composer, from a Chinese composer, around the same time, because of the historical background, societal context, they presented very different sound ideas. That really struck me, and honestly, I haven't been able to do it. I think it presented its challenges for orchestras because, like sometimes it doesn't always make sense instrumentation-wise or duration-wise to put things by different composers written on the same year in one concert. But that's something that I've always wanted to do. So I'm sharing that with you. Another story I wanted to share with you was when I did my master's at CCM, that's short for College Conservatory of Music, as part of the University of Cincinnati. Many years ago, I won't tell you how long ago, but many years ago, that's when the arts administration thing was just starting to become a thing. So people started to talk about the business side of arts, the business side of being a musician. And we had a seminar with someone who back then worked with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. I forgot what her actual job title was. I remembered it was related to outreach and education. And she talked to us about the role of being an assistant conductor. What does that mean? And what kind of skill sets they were looking for when they are hiring. And then at one point of our conversation, we talked about what we're learning in school. How can we apply those knowledge to the real world? So she posed a question, say, okay, so if you're hired as an assistant conductor and you have to program an outreach concert, what pieces would you put on, say, like this? So we were kind of brainstorming and trying to think what would work for that occasion and all that. And I asked a question. I say, do we need to think about marketing, how we market it, like how the repertoire can be marketed to the audience? And she laughed. She was like, we are always thinking about marketing from day one. Only you conductors don't think about it. And that was a hard lesson. You see, I still remember it after almost 20 years. So she's like, we are a nonprofit organization for sure. We are a professional orchestra. Yes, we are here to pursue the highest artistry of arts and music and orchestral music. Yes. But very realistically, we have to sell tickets. So everything they do from the admin side is always how we translate our arts, our passion, our love for this art form into patrons who would be also influenced into wanting to hear what we have to offer. So marketing is always such an important part of her job, as she said. She said sometimes it's really hard to get something out of the conductor of why do you program this? What kind of story can we tell our patrons so they will be interested in coming and see the concert? And then the conductor is like, they are masterpieces. They're nice to put together. And so I don't have a job that is always marketing per se, because when I work with educational settings, when I conduct student orchestras, our end goal is more educational than selling tickets. But I took that lesson with me still until now. So I like to think about how I am telling a story, even just by the pieces that I pick. One time I had a concert called Homecoming, and we did the US premiere of a piano concerto by a Taiwanese composer, Xu Songren, Xu Laoshi, who used Taiwanese Hakka folk tune in one of the movements. And then we finished with the Dvorak 9. So I was trying to tell a story of immigrant relating to different folk songs, and then you miss home and where is home, that question about identity and where home is through the music. That's one example. And of course, I'll put more examples and in a show notes for you to take a look. But that's something that I like to think about. And I like to mix new and old pieces together. I don't like having just a new music concert or, Black History Month. We are only talking about diversity in February and then we are done. No, I hate it. So I try to mix different styles of music in one concert by leading the musicians and the audience through a unique listening and performing experience. I felt that's kind of my unique approach about programming. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to answer a question that I got asked a lot. That is, how do I expand my repertoire? This is something that really troubled me when I was a student as well. There are so many pieces that you don't know, right? And I remember asking my teacher this question. So I asked, is it better to learn a piece deeper or to learn a lot of pieces, but just kind of get to know them to have an impression? The answer was, you should learn a lot of pieces and all of them deep. That didn't really solve my question or my problem, but that's really hard, I would say. So if you're just starting out, I would strongly recommend keeping a repertoire list. What I do now is I list all the things that I have studied enough that I can get up and conduct. So if I just listen to it once on a recording or on a concert, that doesn't count. So I list all the pieces alphabetically by composer, and then I have a star mark on the pieces that I have conducted before, maybe like in rehearsal. And then I have 2 stars by the pieces that I have conducted a concert. So I have performed it. So say I would list Beethoven's symphony and I've studied 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, and I've conducted one in rehearsal as part of my conducting lessons, then I'll put a star mark by 1. And if I had conducted 4 in a concert, I'll put 2 stars by 4. So I kind of keep a log. And from there, if you want to know what is considered standard, a good place to start with is audition excerpt. That sounds ridiculous, but audition excerpts by its nature is something that's kind of basic you should know if you want to get into the business for players, right? So that's a good place to start. Those pieces listed are probably something everybody sort of knows. Even if they had never performed the entire piece, they would have learned the excerpt. And also, by learning those excerpts, you understand what is challenging for even professional players. So you understand if you are working with less professional players, they would definitely have more difficulty that you need to be aware of. Either you need to block more rehearsal time, or you need to get extra help, like, doing sectionals or having a coach with all kinds of things. Or another place where it's good is actually all states repertoire. When I first conducted wind bands, that's where I started. So to kind of look, I think like Texas, Maryland, California, New York are the ones that I like. They are more on the challenging side and a little more diverse, not really, but a little more diverse. And then I consult them with other states to see, okay, if one piece is, just think about this. The all states repertoire is what expected for a good high schooler to be able to perform. So if you're thinking about going into college as a music major, that's what you're expected to know. The same as audition excerpts in general in the professional world, that's a good place to know what is considered standard, like what a conductor should know. If the players know them, you better know them, right? So kind of make a list of what appeals to you. What I usually, when I do this kind of repertoire study, I would study more if I think a piece is possible for me to perform in the near future. Say in 5 years, I might be able to conduct this with an orchestra, either with doing a workshop or with my group, or have a place, or if that's a piece that I can put together with a group of friends to perform to get conducting experiences, that which I did for many years at the beginning of my career, then I will study it more. If not, then if I found, okay, this is something that I probably won't conduct in the next 5 or to 10 years because it has 2 harps, 10 percussions, and a very hard clarinet solo, then I would just kind of glance through it, mark my score to have an idea. So next time someone mentioned this piece, I know, oh, that piece has a lot of instruments that is unusual or like people don't always have, and then also an extensive clarinet solo. So that's part of your knowledge. The second place is to look for pieces programmed or concert programs by conductors with similar vision or with ensembles with similar level. I will tell you, when I started my first job out of school, I didn't know what to program because I went to big music conservatories. I get my degrees at CCM and Eastman, which are huge conservatories, music schools. They are probably the best students that you can get in the United States and around the world. When I was out of school, I faced the problem of, okay, everything that I learned, not everything I learned in school can be applied to my job because of the repertoire is either too hard or too extensive. At Eastman, my teacher, Neil Valron, did Strauss, Mahler for a couple of years, and we don't have the luxury of having 8 horns, not to mention Wagner tuba and all that, right? So a lot of the things that I learned could not be readily used. So I started looking for orchestras that are similar to my ensemble's level and see what they are playing. So they are a few that I frequently check, and I will share with you. My favorite was Cornell University Orchestra when it was led by Chris Kim. Cornell is very similar to my orchestra at Georgia Tech because they are like smart, non-major or double major students who have training since they were little, but they don't want to become a musician professionally. Also, one very important thing about Chris Kim's programming is he is an advocate for women composers and composers of color later on. So I got a lot of ideas, and I honestly learned so much about repertoire or like the pieces and some awesome composers I've never heard of or I've never learned about before by looking at his program. And I'm so grateful for him that he put all the repertoire over the years on the website so it's easily accessible. Some of the pieces are a little hard for my orchestra, maybe for different reasons. I'll just keep them on my wish list. So maybe one day I can do it. Or sometimes I contact the composer, say, hey, I heard about this piece that was performed by Cornell University, but I don't have that instrumentation. Do you have other pieces that I can take a look? Sometimes I don't find anything. Sometimes I became friends with the composer. So that's another place where you can expand your repertoire. If you have a special niche or if you're something that you're passionate about, find someone that is already in this area and learn from them. We are always learning from others. And if you're an orchestral conductor, the Adore project that is co-written by myself and my two good friends, David and Patrick, is a project. So it's basically a blog that we write about pieces that are suitable for college or community orchestras by underrepresented composers. So we share the information, and I know composers are telling us that people reach out to them because they saw our posting on our blog. There are so many websites and databases now with pieces by underrepresented composers, by women composers, by Latinx composers, and those are good places to start. And if you have no idea where to start, just Google on YouTube or Spotify, search something and start listening. If you find a piece that you like, oh, great. Just check out the composer or check out the ensemble to see what else they are doing. And little by little, you will start to expand and have your own repertoire base. So I hope this episode is useful for you. And next week, as I said, I'll be talking about prepping for rehearsals. So how I strategize a rehearsal cycle or from like one rehearsal to the next one and all that. Thank you again for listening to today's episode. I hope you're having a great beginning of the July and the summer. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe so you will get a note when new episode is published. And if you are so kind to leave a review on Applecast, I would be really grateful because that way it will help me to reach out to more audiences. Thank you again. Have a good week. Bye for now.